Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Wokingham Borough Council Planning Committee meeting of the 14th of August. I'd just like to go through a few procedural points before we get underway. As you'll see, there's a public address system which appears to be working satisfactorily at the moment. Could you please ensure your mobile phones are either switched off or switched to silent? And I just confirm that there's no fire drill planned, so if the alarms go off, follow me. The proceedings, as you've probably noticed, are filmed and will be available on the WBC website. You will see from the camera positions that committee members, council officers and the speakers will normally be recorded, but speakers can ask not to be filmed, but their comments will be audio recorded. If I could just introduce the key officers and members. The Planning Committee consists of 11 elected members, borough councillors, and we're supported and advised tonight by a variety of professional officers. On my far right is Callum Wernham, who is the Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to this committee. Next to him is Mary Severin, who is the borough's solicitor, who's here to give us any legal advice and guidance. On my immediate right is Councillor Chris Bowring, the Vice Chairman. I'm Simon Weeks, I chair the committee. On my immediate left is Conor Corrigan, who is the Strategic Development Location Delivery Manager, and next to Conor is Judy Kelly, who is the Highways Development Manager. And the planning officers presenting tonight's applications are currently sat at the side. And to my left and right are the borough councillors on the committee, who the committee makeup consists of councillors from all 4 political groups on the council. The committee is quasi-judicial, and we have set and formal procedures and conduct. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application. Then I will call in turn only those who have pre-registered to speak. If you could please come to the table here. The microphone is controlled by the grey button at the base, and you have a time limit of 3 minutes. I would encourage you to ensure that you get your key points across in those 3 minutes. Members of the committee are interested in the quality of what you have to say, not necessarily the quantity. And I must emphasise only those that have pre-registered to speak may speak. Others, including town or parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors and supporters, are only permitted to address the committee and ask questions if they've pre-registered and should not interrupt proceedings. Following the planning officer's presentation and the comments of those registered speakers, the planning committee members will consider, question, seek clarification for the application and hopefully reach a decision which may or may not agree with the planning officer's recommendation. Finally, an important reminder, the role of the planning committee is to consider and determine any valid planning application using prevailing local and national planning policies. Our role is not to consider or suggest alternative proposals, changes to schemes, whether they're a good idea, whether they're needed, whether they're valid for money, whether there are alternatives. Our role is to consider the application that is before us. Thank you, and we'll move straight on to tonight's agenda. Callum, could you confirm, I believe we have a couple of apologies?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies submitted from Stephen Conway and Cole Duran.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have the minutes for the last meeting in front of me. Callum, I believe there was a change we needed to make to those?
Yes, Chairman. The case officer for application 191090, which on the minutes, page 11, is item 23. There was just a missing reference to, from the members' update, to the additional condition 2, which was also agreed. So on page 11, where it would say were duplicate plans for a different application, add additional condition 2, and then on page 13 under resolved, just the same thing again at the end, just to add additional condition 2.
Don't consider those controversial. Do members have any changes or queries on the minutes, or can I sign those as a true and accurate record of the last meeting? Thank you. Okay, there are no items to be deferred or withdrawn, but I'm going to have to change the sequence of the agenda. The first item, basically because the first 2 of the planning applications are actually not directly, but are linked. So we'll be taking the Foundry College application first, followed by the Silver Meadow Primary School application. And then so that's items 29 and 31 on the agendas. And then we'll then move on to the land at Ashridge Farm and the land at Matthews Green, items 28 and 30. So does any member have a declaration of interest? I have a couple of people indicating.
I'd like to declare an interest because I'm executive member for Highways, so the Highways application is in my portfolio, but I understand I can still have a view of it.
Since it's of no direct personal benefit from you, because if it's approved, it will hopefully be of benefit to all residents of Wokingham. Any others? Right, thank you for that. If we could go straight on then to the Foundry College application, which is on page 45 of your agendas. And the planning application is being presented by Senjuti Manna. Over to you, Senjuti.
Thank you, Chair. The application number is 191640. This application is for the proposed change of use of office accommodation to school to form an enlarged school, along with change of use of amenity land to school playing field, erection of single-story extensions, relocation of existing temporary classrooms, and associated hard and soft landscape works. It is presented to committee because the applicant is the Wokingham Borough Council. The proposed development would create a secure entry for Foundry College, will ensure physical segregation of Foundry College from Brambles Children's Centre, and will provide adequate internal space to support the current cohort of 47 pupils. This is the site location plan. The site is located on Budges Gardens within an existing institutional and residential neighbourhood. Other institutions located in this area are the Kiphatch Primary, the Ashridge Nursery, and Brambles Children's Centre, just next to the Foundry College. This is the proposed site plan, which demonstrates the location of the proposed development in relation to the existing building. The extensions, which are shown in pink here, are limited in scale in terms of height and footprint, adding about 76 square meters area to the existing single-story building. This site plan has been revised to remove a new access that was proposed earlier following public consultation. So the new access was proposed from here, which has now been removed. This is the existing plan. The building currently includes 3 different uses. So the existing Foundry College comprises of areas outlined in red. That is these areas and these 2. The large area in the center is the council offices, and rest here are the Brambles Children's Centre. These are the existing elevations. That's front elevation. These 2 blocks belong to Foundry College. That's council offices, and then Brambles Children's Centre beyond. This is left side elevation. That's right side elevation, and of this elevation, this is a modular block which belongs to Foundry College, and this is proposed to be relocated. That's the rear or the courtyard side elevation. This photo shows the existing access to Foundry College. The members have made a site visit on Friday, so you can remember that. The proposed front extension will be located here to create a secure entry. The top photo here shows the other side of the existing entry and the courtyard, and this shows the external amenity space, which is proposed to be included in the playing fields. So this is the proposed plan for the Foundry College. The council offices will be moved to a different location, thus freeing up space for the school. So this additional space will be included in the school. As I said before, a secure front entrance will be created, including a new circulation corridor around the central courtyard. This is a ramp. This to be used for wheelchairs. Internal alterations will allow for various classrooms and other learning areas as needed by the school. A small classroom, relocation of the modular section, and a covered external workshop area comprises of the development to the rear. These are the proposed elevations. The materials proposed for the external treatment is significantly different from the existing, because these are timber cladding and grey aluminium capping, as opposed to the existing red and brick and white UPVC building. But this being an institutional building, this kind of variation in material is considered acceptable. These are the other two elevations. As for the parking requirements, the revised scheme proposes to retain the existing access and parking arrangements. This is acceptable because, as you can see from this slide, there will be actually a reduction in total number of on-site staff within this section of the building, because we're removing the council offices, which will result in removal of 30 staff. And as a result, from current 53, we'll have only 31 on-site staff, and we have 44 parking. So for the Foundry College, it's acceptable. In terms of impact on character of the area, as I said, the site is located within a well-established institutional area. So as can be seen from this aerial view, the Keep Hatch Primary has got a significant large footprint, and following the extensions, the Foundry College will be, the footprint of the Foundry College will be in keeping with that character of this area. These photos show the Foundry College as can be seen from public viewpoints. These will not be significantly altered because the extensions are very limited in scale and footprint. The moving of the fence forward will not impact the character of the area significantly again, because 1 meter gap is proposed to be maintained between the fence and the public footway, which a condition is included to propose suitable landscaping. And for members' updates, 3 additional comments have been received following the reconsultation of revised site plan. Whilst the removal of previously proposed new access has been considered a positive change, all 3 commentators objected to the proposal on behavior of the pupils' ground and commented that Foundry College should be relocated on a different site. So to conclude, this development wouldn't lead to a harmful impact on the character of the area, neighboring amenities, highway safety, landscape, or protected species, and it is recommended that this planning application is approved subject to conditions for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sanjuti. We just have one registered speaker, Jim Levers, who is the Assistant Director for Learning, Achievement and Partnerships for Wokingham Council. And of course, this is a Wokingham Borough Council application. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I really wanted just to I don't trust it. What I wanted to do, Chair, members, without that, or does it? Yeah? I'll start. I still have my 3 minutes, don't I? Yes, thank you. And what I wanted to try to do to lay out this evening was the rationale behind this, really. And in essence, what you have at the moment in Foundry School is a school that has poor quality facilities for its pupils. What we wanted to try to do was to expand the size of the school, but to keep exactly the same number of pupils that would go there, which would increase the facilities for children who would attend the pupil referral unit, and secondly, to actually improve the overall site, so the site is more secure to its neighbours in terms of the primary school, the nursery, and indeed our immediate neighbours. And in doing that, myself and colleagues in planning and property have had a number of meetings with the local school, the local nursery, and indeed local residents to try to ensure that we've got a facility which can, one, meet the needs of the school and the pupils, but also be mindful of the fact that some of our children who attend there
Right, thank you very much. Jim was the only person registered to speak. Do we have, Malcolm, I think you're a ward member. We'll come to you first. But before we do, just to summarise that the 7 of the 9 planning committee members present today attended a site visit on Friday morning and had a good look round the site and the immediate environs, including the boundaries. And obviously we were able to see firsthand that the building is looking quite sad and tired, and that the proposals that are put forward may attempt to address that. So if we could go firstly then to you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. I know of this school, obviously, and this location generally because it's in the middle of my ward, and I've seen this for many years, or the layout of it. When we went around it, we saw that although it's a fairly large site, some parts of it look a bit old and could be expanded and could be better used. And clearly that's the plan here. It's not to put any additional students into the location at all. It's not to grow the school. It's to grow the physical buildings in the areas so that those who are there at the moment will get a better opportunity to be perhaps taught in a better space or a more appropriate space. So it's an improvement in the opportunity to teach them rather than grow the numbers. The materials used, some of the existing stuff looks a bit old, and so the new material would be more than acceptable. There would be an improvement there. On the parking thing, it says there's no extra parking spaces, but there will be a change of staff. Some will be moving away, and then there's extra ones to the foundry. Can I ask, how will the children get there in the mornings? Are they likely to be walking or people driving them there? Or will they be coming into the school grounds?
We'll just get an answer to that, please.
Our travel plan has been submitted with the application, which kind of details out how many people walk in, how many have been dropped, and how many people take the bus. So as far as I remember, about 12% of the people are generally dropped there by parents. So 12% of 47 is about 5. So that's very minimum number. And we have 44 parking spaces, and as I've shown in the slide, the staff on site for Foundry College will be only 31. So we have additional 13 spaces to be used for different kind of drop-off and other uses.
I think it says somewhere that the car parking and the access will be open all through the day. Does that mean Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or does it mean 7 days a week, 24 hours a day?
I suppose it's Monday to Friday because it's a school, so weekends it will remain closed unless we have other activities planned in the school areas.
What's the other one? There's fences and hedges going around the outside. So they're going to take some of the green space around the outside, which sort of leaves it fairly open. That's the only sort of concern, I think, in terms of the layout. It will actually push those spaces out, so it'll look a bit fuller, but it won't actually cause any loss of pavement or area to the public.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. The site visit demonstrated to me the need for additional and improved space to be created for the students of Foundry College. Notwithstanding, I have 2 small reservations and recommendations. First, whilst the removal of the previously proposed new access seems to address concerns about highway safety, parking, despite your reassurances today and the slides that you've shown us, may still be an issue. Specifically, during the site visit, we were told that during term time, the car parks are already usually full. I appreciate that there will be a reduction in 30 council staff using that site. There will, as you said, be an additional 11 staff employed at the college, albeit employed largely off-site. There are also, we understand, fluctuating numbers of people visiting the Brambles Children's Centre. Would the committee consider adding a condition that an annual car park management strategy be required covering current use and forecast requirements for each new school year, with proposals about how any shortfalls be dealt with in a timely manner that does not impact on neighbouring roads. It's a kind of a preemptive strategy, if you like. Secondly, the application is for the site to be adjusted to within 1 metre of the footpath at the corner of Budger's Gardens and Budger's Roads. I'm talking specifically about that corner, not the whole of the green space. And for tall hedging to be provided at that corner location. Although this quite small plot is WBC-owned land, it does currently provide visual amenity for the neighbouring residents, as well as, crucially, good visibility for vehicles using this road junction. I wonder whether Highways could check the visibility displays with the proposed new fence and the tall hedging on that corner, just on that corner. If visibility does prove to be an issue, I wonder if the proposed boundary fence could be moved slightly further from the footpath, possibly by as little as another metre or half a metre, to improve visibility and also give a little bit more green space while still providing more much needed space for the school.
If we could try and just get clarification on those. Firstly, the proposal, a preemptive parking that would propose a parking strategy that should be reviewed annually. Judy, could you give us some guidance on that? Because obviously it would be very apparent that initially, at least for the first year, since there's no increase in pupil numbers and a net loss of parking staff moving off to another site will create more capacity than has existed for the last few years. So what would your view be on the necessity of such a proposal?
So I think based on the information that's been submitted with the application, it wouldn't be necessary, looking at the expected trips and the staff and so on and the amount of spaces that are there. And as was shown in the presentation, the reduction in staff. The travel plan will be a mechanism to monitor things as time goes on in terms of how people are travelling to the site, parking and so on. So that might be the better mechanism to leave it within the travel plan rather than a car park monitoring condition, in my view.
Could you get some clarification, please, on obviously a lot of the applications we consider have a travel plan. What is the proposal and the frequency for reviewing whether those travel plans are still relevant?
Normally, the travel plans should be updated on a yearly basis because the pupil role changes. And they're
that help address that for you? Or you were suggesting an annual review?
Yes, it does. But my understanding is that, and I may be wrong, that travel plans are at the discretion of heads of schools.
I think the subtle difference is here, this is Wokingham Borough Council run school, so we could direct staff, as opposed to with an academy, for instance, we wouldn't be able to. Could we take the third point you raised, and then we'll come on to the landscaping. Visibility displays the access road from Budger's Gardens onto the other road. Could you confirm that they are in accordance with the requirements, even with the proposed change in the boundary treatments moving out?
So my understanding is that the new boundary treatment is on the line of the existing boundary treatment. Is that right?
But obviously they're residential roads and Budger's Gardens is dead end roads.
Yeah, so that would be fine because the visibility display is it's measured from where Budger's Gardens meets the major road, Budger's Road, and it's measured from a point 2.4 metres back from that junction. So that sits well within the green area in advance of the footpath.
Okay, and then, St Judy, could you comment on the issue about the suggestion of, should we say, more substantial landscaping? I am acutely aware, though, that from my own experience, that the bigger the plants that you plant, the less successful they are in getting established. So clearly when the boundary is relocated, the planting there will be quite minimal initially.
So condition is included in the report. Condition 5 for landscape scheme to be submitted pre-commencement condition, because at present what's shown here is just very sketchy. No landscape details, as you can see, has been given. So the landscape trees and landscape officer has requested for a landscape plan as a pre-commencement condition.
Gary.
Yeah, sorry I didn't go on the site visit with you. I couldn't make it. But I went the following Sunday and I had a look around the site as best I could. It was closed, admittedly, and I did speak to some of the local residents. It was fairly obvious that they weren't very happy with the scheme in general. And I would say the building does lack a little something anyway. And the basic principle of trying to improve the facility for the 47 people, I can see some merit in. But then I looked at the boundary, and this was a key issue with several residents I spoke to. And the changing of that boundary line and moving it out does nothing to improve or enhance the product being offered to the children. And my view is it should not be done. There are very, very clear issues about the sight lines when you get to the bottom of the road. And my personal view is it should be left well alone. In effect, it's land grab. It achieves nothing at all for the overall scheme. So that's the first point. I believe that should not be altered under any circumstances. There was another issue on page 50 about the officers now about bad language and bad behaviour. Speaking to one of the residents there, this gentleman's elderly wife comes out and she cleans the road and she picks up cigarette ends and lots of tins and whatever, because the children who can't smoke in the school come out onto that side of the road and smoke. If you move the fencing out, you move them closer to the houses. And I'm disappointed with the officer's note. Bad language and abusive behaviour are not material considerations. Perhaps they're not, but the council has a duty of care to its residents, and if through this planning process they pick up on information where things are not quite right, they have a duty of care also to look into that matter and deal with it. Not a planning matter perhaps, but I think an important matter. And another area that does bother me is, in its own right, I think I can see merit in this planning application, but when I read it in conjunction with item 31, it does worry me that this really is not about improving the facility in the school, it's about finding somewhere else for the staff. And I don't want item 31 to be fettered by any decision we take on this. I want it to be taken independently of whatever is said here, because there are issues there. I'm guessing that the staff here are going to go to Shinfield, and this talks 40-odd, Shinfield talks of 55. I did make a point about the green amenity space borders. I believe under no circumstances should they be changed. They achieve nothing. And I mean, we do talk about the public sector equality duty or eliminate unlawful discrimination, harassment of victim and other conducted prohibited by the Act. Yet we seem to say it's nothing to do with planning. I nearly used other words. So that's about how I would sum it. I'm very uncomfortable with it. I am definitely utterly opposed to any movement of the fencing or the hedging along Budge's lane, is it, going onto, leading onto the road. The residents will gain nothing by it. They will lose by it. And the point you make about replanting, it will take a long time to establish itself, and they're going to be stuck with an even more ugly site than it really is now. And there is no material benefit in moving it. And if that cannot be changed, I will certainly vote against it, because I think it's very wrong.
Okay. Before we come to the next speaker, I just want to get clarification. Jim, are you still here, Jim? Yeah, sorry, I'm looking at the back where you were before. Could you just confirm that my understanding is that, sorry, can we just have one meeting, please? There is a requirement of a set amount of space per pupil, outdoor space, because I know this from when I was a school governor and we couldn't expand the school any further because it would erode the amount of outdoor space. Is this additional outdoor space that is being created by the proposed boundary moving, is that to bring it up to the necessary standard, or is it for another reason?
No, Chair, it's not to actually bring it up to that standard. What it's to do is to try to give assurance to our... I wonder why... It's to try to give assurance and reassurance to our local neighbours that we're providing proper barriers to our boundary. That's the principal reason for doing it. And it's done on the basis, certainly in terms of my conversations with people that I've met in relation to the... Yeah, I'm not going to lose my... I will stay with this, Chair. The intention really in all of our conversations with our local neighbours is to try and ensure we have a safe environment. So the hedging and boundary that we're looking at in relation to regards that Councillor raised was actually on the basis of conversations that we had with Asbridge Nursery. I fail to understand the issue of a land grab, given that on both sides of that fence it belongs to the council anyway.
Pauline.
So actually, a small point coming back on the landscaping of that fence. The land that was playing field on the other side of that fence, I felt was quite cramped anyway. It isn't exactly very big, and maybe you couldn't see that because you couldn't get into the actual site properly. But if we are going to move the fence, can we have some assurance that the one great benefit of the current fence we've got is that you can't see it? If you're going to move it, and if you have to move it, could we make sure it's properly landscaped like it is at the moment with privet or whatever that means that you can't actually see the physical fence? Because we don't want it to look like Colditz, really.
That's the purpose of the landscape condition, and the precise details of the landscaping will have to be signed off by planning.
My request is really to planning to make sure that fence is invisible.
Are there any other members wishing to speak? Abdul, sorry, I missed.
Thank you, Chairman. I did visit the site. My only small concern is about outside, can we have double yellow lines in case of any emergency vehicles access, get disturbed by people parking right outside the schools? Thank you.
I'd like to suggest that we don't consider putting that in now because as we all know, double yellow lines do not actually stop people parking. Double yellow lines sometimes are a magnet for parking. So double yellow lines would be by no means guarantee access for emergency vehicles necessarily any more than having no double yellow lines. My understanding is that cars are not regularly parked all day in Budge's Gardens associated with the school, and particularly with the reduction in staff numbers, there will be more parking actually on site. The planning committee isn't really in a position to introduce highway conditions, but if there was a requirement, Judy, for double yellow lines determined at a future date, that is something that could be considered by the Highways Authority, who would do it by means of a traffic regulation order, which is not something that is within our control on the planning committee. Okay, all right. Rochelle?
I noticed on page 50, there's a traffic survey was already carried out to audit the number of cars using the site. Can we also have a traffic survey after the work is done to get an idea to see if there's any change?
Well, I think it's going to be a reduction. I'm not sure that undertaking a traffic survey as a result of having 13 or 14 staff moving off site is a good use of council's funding. But bluntly, Rochelle, if there are less people, the same number of pupils and less staff, the amount of traffic generated should not be increasing. Okay. Okay. Connor?
Rochelle, there's a travel plan that will go with this anyway. It's not conditioned, but there is, so that the travel plan will look at parking and vehicle movements and staff, how they get to and from it. So that would all be wrapped up in a travel plan as you look at that and review that every year to 2 years.
I think that's all the, Gary, sorry.
Really, trees and landscape on page 55. It's really cavalier in a way, the way it's written. It'll involve the removal of existing trees. It doesn't say how many will be removed, how many will be replaced. They talk of them in poor condition. And the plan will be subject to, the tree protection plan will be subject to application. It goes on, talks about the fence in paragraph 19 in the same language. I mean, we are the planning authority and it's for something we own. So in a way, there's really little very independence in there. And if you read further into the report, there are many, many residents who have very grave reservations about moving that fence. And I'll just come back and say it again. I think they're moving the fence. If you could say to me, the 47 kids who live there must have more space by statute, I could perhaps understand it. But if they were working within the guidelines of the system as things stand now, there is no requirement to expand it. You're not improving the buildings for them, you're not improving the games rooms or anything like that. All you're doing is you won't use the word, a lot of neighbours. And I think we ought to take that into consideration. We have a duty of care to these people, and I believe we should not move that fence.
I will remind you, Gary, I fully understand your point and where you're coming from, but as I say in my introduction to the committee meeting, that our role is not to redesign schemes. So clearly, if you can't support this scheme, you know how to voice that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So, Chris, last speaker.
Thank you. Just on Gary's earlier points, they may be correct, and I'm sure he feels that they are. But he said himself they're not planning matters. And I think it is wrong to vote against on the planning committee for some things which are not planning matters. If we all do that, we'll be turning down applications which are perfectly sound. Just because we approve, if we approve this planning application, it doesn't mean we agree with all aspects of it. We also have a Children's Services Department which has put forward the application, and they have a responsibility as well, but that's in a different area. So I think we do need to stick to planning matters. I wasn't able to attend the site visit, so not really in a good position as other members to assess the highways aspect, so I will abstain on this application.
Right. So, members, you have a proposal in front of you. Gary, did you want to put an alternative proposal?
What I will say in answer to Chris's comments is that if he thinks I'm here to carry out the duties of the planning officers or recommendations from borough council officers, then he's really, really very wrong. And if that's the way he thinks the committee should be run, it's going to leave me very little alternative if it continues this way.
Right,
my alternative recommendation would be that the existing fence line along that corner of Budges Lane and Road, that corner there, is retained in its present form.
Would anyone like to second Gary's proposal? No, so that falls away. So we come to the main proposal, which is clearly detailed at the start of the report. There's a couple of additional information about the 3 additional comments received. I would remind all members of the committee, whilst there are a large number of objections to this application, when I went through them, a clear majority of those were related to the changes to the access, and as you know, those changes following the level of local concern and comments from local members were withdrawn, and so the access remains unchanged. So the access is unchanged. There is no change in pupil numbers. There are a reduction in the number of WBC staff on the site. There will be more parking spaces as a result of that, and a building that those of us went on the site visit, which is currently very sad and shabby looking, will significantly be enhanced by the proposed changes. So with all that, I'm going to put that to the vote. Could members please indicate whether they're prepared to support application 191640 as detailed in the officer's recommendation? Okay, so that is carried, and we have 1 abstention and 1 against. Okay, so that application is approved. Thank you. We now move on to the Silver Meadow Primary School application, which is slightly linked to the last application, as we'll see. We'll just go to that. So members, that this is the application on page 109. Okay, and Kaylee, you're going to present this application for us, I think.
Thank you, Chair. If I could please draw members' attention to the update, which includes 2 points. Firstly, there is one neighbour objection has been received, outlining pupil safeguarding issues. It is considered, this is considered to be an operational matter, which will be managed between the council and the schools themselves. The second point is the addition of 2 conditions. One requesting a travel plan and a second condition requesting a parking management scheme. That completes the members' updates. This application before you for Silver Meadow Primary School, also known as Alder Groves Primary School, application reference 191651. The application is for full planning permission for the proposed temporary use of the upper floor of the school building to provide office accommodation for a 5-year period until the school is fully occupied. And leading on from the previous application, staff moving from Foundry College will be housed within the first floor of Silver Meadow Primary School. The application site is located to the west of Shinfield, east of Rise Green and south of Church Lane, as indicated here by the white star. The site itself comprises a completed school building with associated parking and fencing, which can be seen here in the red line. This is the view into the application site facing southwest. Here you can see the northern elevation and the first floor of the school building, which is subject to this application. This plan shows the approved reserved matters details of the school and associated works, such as the fencing and security gates. As approved, a 1.8 to 2.2 metre fence with pedestrian and vehicular gates will be installed in this location here. This northwest facing view shows the southern elevation of the school. And the arrow shows the location of the installed gate as approved. This gate will act as separation between WBC staff and the school users. An additional 1.8 metre fence is proposed to partially wrap the building along the length of the western elevation and around the entrance doorway to the north elevation, again creating separation between the WBC staff and school users. The external door on the northern elevation will be used by WBC staff and will be secured by digital locking. A second internal door with digital locking will prevent WB staff from accessing the rest of the school building at ground floor level. Can be seen. How do you get the pointer? So this is the fence indicated here to the left, and access will be taken through this door here. And again, the other door here will stop staff from entering into the ground floor of the school, and access up onto the first floor is achieved here through the stairs and the lift. This plan demonstrates the first floor of the building and the rooms to be occupied by WBC staff. The layout of desks in this plan is for indicative purposes only. So in conclusion, the application is compliant with the Council's adopted policies, including core strategy policies CP1, 2, 6 and 9, and managing development delivery policies CCO1 and CCO7. The proposal for a temporary use does not conflict with the Shinfield Parish Neighbourhood Plan or the south of the M4 SDL development guidance. No objections have been received by consultees or members, and the proposal does not alter the external elements of the building or its surroundings. Temporary use of the first floor of Silver Meadows School as office accommodation for a 5-year period is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you, Kayleigh. Again, Jim, would you like to summarise the position
I think
on
very
this?
briefly, Chair. The reason for this application is to make use of the resources that we see here at what we call Silver Meadows. We will use that in the main to decant staff out of the Foundry site, the Bramble site, into this school for a limited period of time, which we've identified as 5 years, and that in the longer term would be part of the Council's overall accommodation strategy. We're very aware of the impact and issues in relation to parking. We've had considerable conversations with the school head, and we fully understand the issue that's raised in relation to a travel plan.
All right, thank you. There's no other people registered to speak, and we don't have a ward member either for this. Sorry, Jim. Apologies, Jim. Sorry. I do remember you were a late entry, though, weren't you? Yes, okay. So if you'd like to come up and swap places, if the two Jims could swap places, please.
Right, thank you, Chair, Member and officers. I want to make it very clear from the start that I'm very supportive of the concept of this application. Making efficient use of Wokingham Council's property is absolutely the right thing to do. My concern is, and I know you've only had one official comment on this, is about the safeguarding. Schools nowadays sadly need to be secured with monitored and restricted access and egress, and also to prevent watching, if that's the right word, overseeing of children. Gone are the days when I was young, and yes, I was young once, where you could just pop in and out of school. The member upstate quite clearly states that it's an operational issue. I think it's a little bit more than that. I think we have to be clear with this application how we're going to safeguard the children all the way through. You've mentioned 2 internal changes for doors. What I can't see from the application is how shared and or not segregated facilities within the building are actually managed. I'd like to be able to see that with the application if possible. As the committee may know, Shinfield has been subject to some significant growth over the last few years. You may be aware of that. The 2 existing schools are oversubscribed. There are many residents already busing children to outside of the ward. I think the 30 pupils a year is a sensible estimate. With the growth that we've currently experienced and are likely to experience, that actually may be exceeded very, very quickly. If it is, I'd like to know what the process is to actually review this on a regular basis so that the 5 years may have to come in earlier. So, and those are the 2 points I'd just like to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Clearly, this is a new school that has been built in anticipation of pupil numbers. We have well in excess of 60 schools in the borough. And sometimes we find that the schools are not quite ready when we need them to be ready. This is a particular case where we find the school is ready, but we don't have the pupils because some of the local housing is not being developed necessarily at the rate or with the level of young children that we expect. Clearly, it is sensible that the council makes use of such additional space. So I think what we've, the main issue that we've heard, and I think before we come to individual speakers, we'll try and get some clarification on this, is the position with regard to the distinct separate entrances. If we can just elaborate a little bit on the segregation of the pupils. Could we also confirm, just out of interest, whether the council staff who would be using this separate entrance and separate facilities would normally be CRB checked, or whatever the correct terminology is? Can we get some clarification on those points to start with?
Simon, I'll take this. Yeah, so in terms of safeguarding, obviously that is a key issue for all schools and sites with younger people. The reason the design is the way it is, where you have the separation of the doors, is that none of the staff who is moving there can get into the main school building. That's still controlled through the reception. In terms of where they sit, they'll obviously sit upstairs. There is windows, but there is opportunities, obviously, because we're managing it, we're the operator, where if need be, and I don't know if the kids that the staff are CRB checked, they're going there, but they're coming from the Foundry College, a lot of them, so I'm presuming they're education staff, so they would be. But there is opportunity to put film on the inside where you can't actually see it across on the playing fields. So they're all really easy operational issues to fix. Don't necessarily think we need a condition on that, on the basis that we're the council, we're running it, and it's the education department who are actually running it as well. And they've been in conversations with the trust who are taking it over. So in terms of safeguarding, I think we're going probably as far as they're going as far as they can with the segregation, the separation of the school from the office, and also the fence will help. So you'll have two different things. But yeah, I totally agree with your synopsis on we need to be very careful these days. I hope that's answered that question for you. On the issue of the pupils and the staff, we are fully aware of that if the school, so the school was designed to be a school, it wasn't designed to be offices. So we are very aware when we made this decision or looked at it, that if the school needs creep up, so actually you need the school much quicker, that the WBC staff have to move out. So there is a contingency plan that if for instance, in year 2 that actually more was needed, the council would have to then relocate those staff elsewhere. So it has been thought about as part of this application, and as well the balance between parking and so pupil staff from the school and staff from the thing. The balance is made on that. So there's a review mechanism every year that if the school increases and the parking becomes pressured, we can deal with that.
So just to be clear, the school pupils and the demand for school pupil places will always have priority over any need for council staff to be accommodated.
Yes.
Okay. Can we also confirm that the Keys Trust who are going to run it are happy with this arrangement? Yeah. Well, Jim's been talking to them. So could you? It's a bit unorthodox, but if you could just briefly. Yep. Briefly.
All staff who are actually accommodated at the site will be education staff.
Right.
We have deliberately excluded all of the staff.
Okay.
You will not be allowed in the building unless you have a proper, up-to-date DBS check.
Okay. I called it CRB, but it's old hat. Old hat. Yes.
So everybody will be DBS checked. We will have no other staff other than education staff there. I can go through the individual groups if that would assist the community.
No, you're the assistant director for that area, so I think we take your assurance seriously. Thank you. Members, so Andrew first, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I believe that this application would result in a very efficient and effective use of this resource, and crucially, that we're told that it would not impact on the operation of the school at any time. I believe that's a very important consideration. I have two concerns with the application, both of which now I believe have been addressed to my satisfaction. The first was relating to car parking and the members' update, and the recommendation for a car park management strategy I feel is very appropriate indeed. The Assistant Director's comments with regards to safeguarding and who the office staff would be on site has also helped to allay one of my safeguarding concerns. My concern there was relating to potential visitors to the site. I don't know whether access to the wider site, to the entrance to the site, might be controlled in any sort of way to possibly help exclude visitors, but I am reassured by the comments that the Assistant Director has made.
Thank you. The condition to have a travel plan, there's already a travel plan for which is set in the reserve matters application for the school. So is the travel plan compatible with that?
It will be, because we will be getting one in. So we need to review that as we go forward. So the staff will have their own travel plan with the school, two separate.
So this travel plan is referring to upstairs, is it? Not downstairs? Yes. Oh, it's separate from the school. Okay, that's right. Thank you.
Simon. There's a one-liner there about the one neighbour's objection, which actually was a very powerful objection. Unfortunately, I copied it and forgot to bring it with me. But it was something really, I think, that the members should have read as a whole, not as just a one-liner that it's okay, because there were very serious points raised in it, and I think they've just been glossed over by this report. Perhaps not a key issue, but we're putting 55 staff into an academy building, and we're the worst funded council in England, so it's said. So there must be a financial implication to the council on that. And so whether that's justified or not is probably another matter. They talk about good bus routes, but I measured it on last Sunday, and it's 0.5 to the bus stop coming from Reading, and it's 0.6 of a mile to the bus stop coming from Arborfield and etc. Wokingham. I wouldn't have considered that as being good bus routes. I would have thought quite the opposite. The location is right at the end of a very large building estate in fairly narrow estate roads. And I'm not sure if it was a planning application for an office to employ 55 staff in that particular location, we would deem it to be okay. So there are issues I have with it. And the other point is, in the broader scheme of things, the Arborfield School developer on the Garrison Primary School has gone into liquidation. So that school's been delayed by a couple of years. To my knowledge, the Coombs is fairly full, as is Farley Hill. I'm not sure about the Shinfield Primary School. So all of these schools have got pressure capacities on them, and this is a school that could absorb that capacity temporarily, but it would appear from the documents, although it's said otherwise, that they would have a lease to stay there till 2024. So I don't think it's strictly true that between now and 2024, if there's a problem with children in school, they won't be bused there because of the upper class are being used for something else. They'd be moved further on. So I'm not sure if allowing our staff to stay there till 2024 has another impact on how the system works. So I've got some real reservations about the whole thing. A word I've used before is cavalier. It's not clearly laid out to satisfactory to me. And I said, but the most important thing is the residents' letter was so powerful, by not having it in the report, I think is really misleading to the committee.
Well, my understanding was not in the report, it was received after the deadline. It is detailed on the second page of the member update. There's a... Okay, all right, okay. Fine. Any other people wishing to speak on this application? Right, Gary, do you want to put an alternative proposal forward? Just to remind you, you were expressing concern about pressures on other schools. I think we've heard from both Jim and from Connor this evening that the potential additional staff who will be accommodated there for up to 5 years is going to flex in accordance with the demand for the school places, which will always have priority over the staff places. I think the other point just to make out is that my understanding is quite a number of these staff are unlikely to be using a bus service because they actually go out to visit pupils. And so I don't think it's likely they will be making those visits by bus. They will be probably very much reliant on the private car in this instance.
But again, it's the writing of the report saying it's an okay bus route when it's 0.6 of a mile from bus shelter. That's not a well-written report. That's misleading. But in terms of would I have another recommendation? You've said the words, but how you put it into a condition, I'm not sure. And that is that the staff can remain there until such time as there is a requirement for children to go to that school, be it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, not till 2024.
It would not be in the council's interest, Gary, to bus pupils, for instance, from Arborfield to school even further away, because as you know, as a local authority, we're trying to minimise the very expensive school transport costs that we have to incur. We will prepare pupils to go to their local school. Not only does that avoid the cost of moving them to schools out of their area, it also minimises the amount of traffic congestion that we create. Right, members, we have the application in front of us. Nobody else is indicating to speak. I will put this to the vote. So this is application number 191651. Sorry? Oh, sorry, Jim.
My only concern, my concerns have been sated so far, with the exception of one, and that's over the 5-year period. If we are reducing the number of employees and increasing the number of pupils, at some point, those pupils are going to need to go upstairs. So how would that migration be constructed?
Okay, can I suggest that we put an informative on this rather than a condition, and that informative is that the upstairs use is exclusively for one category or the other. It's either for pupils or it's for staff. There's no attempt to share that. Would that satisfy that?
Thank you very much.
All right, okay. So with that informative that we could add, please put that, Connor? Yeah. Okay, could we please indicate whether you can support... plus the additional condition in the members' update. Could you please indicate whether you can support that application? Right, and no one abstaining. Are you abstaining or against, Gary? Against, right, okay. So that is approved. Thank you. We now move on to the Ashridge Farm application. Yes, I used to put tabs. Members, so we now come to application 191010. This is for a section of the Northern Distributor Road, and Alex Thwaites is going to be presenting this as the planning officer for this application is on leave at the moment. So, Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening all. So this is the full application for a section of the Northern Distributor Road, NDR, through Ashridge Farm, linking Bell Foundry Lane to the west with Kentwood Farm to the east, and incorporating a new priority junction on Bell Foundry Lane and associated works, including a shared footway and cycleway. This application is for a section of the NDR and is often referred to as the Ashridge Farm section. The NDR route in its entirety will connect Copper Beach roundabout in the east with Reading Road to the west. The above slide shows the full extent of the final agreed route of the NDR as approved by WBC's executive in 2015. And this application is for a relatively small circle section, a relatively small central section as highlighted by the shaded circle. Other sections of the route are either already complete and in operation, such as the sections through Matthews Green Farm, Bell Foundry Lane, Kentwood Farm East, and sections at Keepat Beach and Kentwood Farm West are currently under construction. The entire route is due to open in 2021. As mentioned already, application is for a central section of the route, the application site being located approximately 1 mile to the north of Wokingham Town Centre and to the south of the A329M. The application site extends out to the west to include part of the Bell Foundry Lane. The site is located within the North Wokingham SDL as identified within the core strategy. The Ashridge stream runs up through the eastern side of the site from the south to the north before it heads in a northerly-western direction where it joins the Embrook. The immediate surrounding area comprises of Ashridge Farmhouse, the barns, the outbuilding, and the outbuildings, which are located approximately 100 metres to the south of the application site. The farmhouse is Grade 2 listed and is a building that fronts onto Warren House Road. The barns, which have originally been associated with the farmhouse, include a collection of 6 outbuildings, one of which is Grade 2 listed, and a series of other brick and timber outbuildings which are curtilage listed. These outbuildings have permission for their conversion into 5 dwellings, although this has yet to be implemented. So again, this slide just shows the site location, but from an aerial photo view. This shows the housing development of Kentwood Farm to the east, which has planning permission for 225 dwellings, and the Bell Farm development to the northwest, which has planning permission for 127 dwellings. The next slide shows the general arrangement of the road, which would comprise of a single carriageway, approximately 0.5 kilometres in length and 7.3 metres wide, running from where it tie-in with Bell Foundry Lane to where it connects to the Kentwood Farm development site to the east. As with other sections of the NDR, the scheme includes provision for pedestrians and cyclists by way of a 3 metres shared pathway alongside each side of the carriageway, and also a 2 metre green verge along areas where this is achievable. A new junction arrangement will be provided on Bell Foundry Lane, whereby the priority would be for traffic travelling along the NDR. The existing access lane, which currently serves 2 residential properties, and the sewage treatment works would be stopped up, and in its place, a new access will be provided off the north side of the NDR, as shown on this slide. In terms of the drainage, the surface water will drain onto either side of the road via a network of swales, which will eventually discharge into 2 basins. The final design of these details will be provided at the detailed design stage, This approach has been accepted by the Environment Agency as well as the WBC drainage team. The noise assessment report accompanying the application identified the use of the road is likely to result in a moderate impact to the occupants of properties 1 and 2, Bell Foundry Lane. Therefore, a condition is recommended which requires details of proposed mitigation for these 2 properties. So the proposed alignment has been developed in consultation with WBC Trees and Landscape Officer to seek and minimise the extent of tree removal. The scheme would result in a removal of 20 individual trees, 6 groups of trees, and partial removal of 5 hedgerows. However, it is considered that the proposed landscape mitigation measures would help to reduce the impacts upon the surrounding landscape. Such measures include a verge, tree planting, and tree planting along the side of the roads, which is going to be in the region of about 70 new trees, which is an approach consistent along the NDR route as a whole. In addition, the scheme now provides for suitable planting between the road and Ashridge Farm in order to maintain a visual and physical separation from the listed building and its curtilage. Just to touch on that, in terms of impact on the Ashridge Farm, Historic England have had 2 comments to make regarding the original plans. The first of these comments being the landscaping between the farm and the road. This was noted, and following revised plans, there's an amended scheme now which is considered to achieve a satisfactory buffer. And the second comment was over it was an indicative lighting strategy, but this is, so now a lighting strategy has been incorporated into condition 3, so we can, in order to secure an appropriate scheme. So therefore, there's no updates in the members' update, so the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions contained within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And we have Claire Williams from WSP to speak in support of the application. Good evening.
Okay, good evening. So, as the officer said, the general alignment of the distributor road, including the section of the Ashridge Farm site, south of sewage works, was agreed at the Council's Executive Committee in 2015. So I'd just like to stress that the exact alignment from the Bow Foundry Junction to the tie-in with the Kentwood Farm residential scheme has since been optimised in a thorough and iterative design process, taking account of environmental assessment, planning policy, and in consultation with Wokingham officers. So it's now considered to represent the best possible alignment but to preserve trees and habitats, as well as the setting of the Grade 2 listed Ashridge farmhouse. We have responded to the comments of the Landscape Officer and Historic England, and the proposed new landscape design now includes avenue tree planting to be consistent with the rest of the Northern Distributor Road. Again, as the officer said, an area of woodland buffer planting is also proposed to screen the road from the farm and help retain what remains of the rural agricultural setting around the Grade 2 star-listed Ashridge farmhouse. The scheme includes a 3-metre wide shared pedestrian cycle path separated from the carriageway with a 3-metre verge. The cycling facilities link with both the existing and planned cycling routes, including along the entire length of the Northern Distributor Road. So this would enable safe travel by means other than a car, contributing to the health of local communities. The Ashridge link of the Northern Distributor Road specifically would reduce the traffic along the Warren House Road by 300 to 400 vehicles in peak hours. This would significantly improve the environment for local residents, particularly along Warren House Road. The proposal includes new hedgerow planting, wildflower grassland planting, scrub and woodland planting, together with drainage ditches and attenuation basins to be planted with a wetland meadow mix. And because of all this, it would achieve a net gain of these habitats. Mammal passes are proposed in the culvert of the Ashridge stream, along with the bat boxes throughout the scheme. And the new avenue tree planting would also provide a new navigational feature for the bat, somewhat compensating for the loss of hedgerow. So in conclusion, the Ashridge section of the North Distributor Road is a safe, functional, well-landscaped scheme with quality provision for walkers and cyclists. The entire route is due to be open in 2021, and this is the last section of the strategic and important piece of infrastructure to seek planning permission. And on this basis, we ask you to grant the consent for the scheme here today.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, members, as has been summarised by both the Speaker and the Planning Officer, this is a critical part of the Northern Distributor Road, which is due to complete and therefore open in 2021. There are no objections from the Town Council. There are no objections from any ward members. There is one resident objection, which I think in all fairness is a criticism of overall planning policy of not wanting to build rather than any specific points related to the road. So I'm hoping that we can process this application fairly rapidly. Do any members wish to speak on this? Malcolm?
Since it's my ward, I was ask a couple
part of it is.
Part of it is, yeah. Two very simple ones. I agree with all the assessments of the road being an essential part. Without it, things would be difficult. The road width, which is one of the questions I always ask at these things, is nice and wide. It's 7.3 metres. So it's an essential part, and I have absolutely no problem. Just two sort of fairly basic questions. On page 29, it says the modelling has predicted that the two-way flows along these roads would reduce around by about 470 vehicles in a morning hour and by over 300 in the evening. I just find that a bit odd that it reduces, bearing in mind it's got the houses there and more will be built. How do you reduce that usage of the road? How is that achieved?
That's comparing the situation with the new Ashridge Northern Distributor Road in and comparing if it wasn't in. So if we didn't put the road in, there would be in the region of sort of 900 to 1,000 two-way flows on Warren House Road. But by putting the new section of road in, a lot of that traffic is transferred onto it. So that reduces it on Warren House Road.
Okay, so you're projecting what the traffic will be, and then say this makes it so much better by doing it.
Yes.
Second. Sorry, I forgot. Bound to be removed if you're going to be building houses and things. Normally, obviously, we plant lots of trees to match it. Here, is it the trees that are going along the side of the road, which is actually going to be considered equivalent, substantially? Will they be saplings, I guess? So they're going to take a while to grow, but they will be... Will there be any hedges or mostly saplings? I'm just looking after the green bit on the side of the road.
They're not They're not tiny ones. They're larger than that because they're on the road. And if you look at the NDR the whole way through, it has larger trees. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 3 points or questions. Well, first is a question. The red line that we've got on the map, there's a sort of a sliver that goes down south, about halfway along. I just wondered what that was, just as a first question.
Yeah, it's to allow access to the site, so it's the groundwork that has to go in to do that, so it gets them off Warrenhouse Road, because they'll have to do some works along that.
So that will end up back to... Right. Okay.
It's access to the construction compound.
Thank you. The second one is really a concern that's becoming more and more apparent, that if we take down mature trees and we're thinking about climate change, we actually need not one-for-one replacement. I know we've got here 70. I don't know what that represents, but the loss of the hedgerows and the trees, I doubt in this case, will mitigate over quite a period of time. I'm not saying we need possibly to do anything in this application, but it's just flagging up this realisation about tree replacement and the carbon capture. The other point is condition 6. We talk about levels in relation to a fixed datum point. Now, the council's been caught out way back in the past, I'm sure Gary can remember, where we didn't actually fix what that datum point was. So my question is, at what point will that fixed datum point be agreed and become part of, in effect, the application?
It'll be part of the detailed design work. So when they're in doing the levels checks and doing the measurements of the existing ground levels, that's where they'll be able to fix it. So they've currently gone in and done some of the design work, and they'll have the levels. So it's whatever the level they need to go above. So the road does actually increase in height in one point because it has to go over the Ashford stream and another one. So it does get higher, but that's when we'll know that the fixed level, when they're actually in surveying.
So that does relate to the drainage conditions for this road. I would have thought that fixed datum point would have been set at this point.
So it's across the entire road. So the road, as it comes from the east, it has to go over the bridge. So there's a new culvert going in for the Ashford stream, and there's actually a stream running on the Kentwood side next door as well. So it starts to go up the road, and then it'll drop down again once it gets past that. So the levels within the site will be known now, and that's when we'll fix it. We'll be able to fix it now, but it's not in the condition, but it's part of the details that we will get as part of the next stages of this.
Yes, it was just in response to your points about replacing more habitats than is being lost. A quantitative biodiversity net gain report was actually submitted with the application, and for area-based habitats, which would include the woodland, the scheme is actually replacing more than it is losing. I don't have the exact figures for woodland, but if you were to look at that report, it would tell you, and I do believe that we're replacing more trees than we are losing.
I think I did make the point, yes, it may be more trees, but it doesn't mitigate the impact on carbon capture of loss of those mature trees.
But I think you have to consider the cumulative impact, because, for instance, if you look at an individual section, if you go to the west, there's thousands of trees being planted adjacent to the NDR, none of which were there before. So I think there's a net gain. It isn't necessarily all in one specific place.
It's also using a Natural England metric, and it does take into account the difficulty and the time taken to replace the habitat, in other words, for that new habitat to become mature.
I think Natural England may catch up with reality at some point. That's the last thing I will say.
You mentioned cycleways briefly, and I didn't quite catch what you said, but I couldn't find cycleway provision on the map. I just wondered if you could repeat what you said.
Yes, it's basically just in line with the strategy for the rest of the distributor road. There is a shared pedestrian and cycle path separated from the main carriageway.
That's the words I was after, thank you.
You're talking about the present trees that are being replaced on the NWDR, the Old Forest Road part. The survival rate of the trees that they planted was about 20%. So hopefully they're going to replant some of these trees because of the summer last year killed almost all the trees they had there. So saying you're going to plant 20 for everyone doesn't make any difference if only 1 out of 5 survives.
There's normally, you can confirm this, there's normally a 5-year requirement that if in the first 5 years any trees that die have to be replaced. Yeah, any tree expert will tell you the smaller the tree planted, the more successful it is in getting established. Very large trees being planted, very few of them survive. Absolutely agree, but there's a lot of new open space being created across the borough, which is available now. Carbon capture, whether it's public access or not, would be the same, of course. Right. Any other members wishing to speak, or we can take this? We'll take this to the vote then. So, members, there's no additional information in the members' update that we have to consider as part of this. You have an application in front of you. This has been part of a scheme that's a long time coming. It's been approved by the executive in the past, and it's yet another link, important link in this section of the NDR. So could members please indicate whether they're prepared to support application 191010? And that is unanimous. Thank you, members. So that is approved. And now we come to the last application on the agenda, which is land at Matthews Green Farm. Thank you. Let's get to the right page. Move. There we, yeah, see, I was going to say them out. Right. Okay, members. So, again, Alex Thwaites. Alex, could you present on this, please?
Thank you, Chair, again. So, this is the application for the reserve matters for outline planning consent 2014-2242. The reserve matters comprise details of the local centre, including retail use on the ground floor and 16 dwellings on the upper floor, with associated parking and landscaping. The principle of development for 760 dwellings on the Matthews Green Farm site was established through the granting of the outline planning permission in April 2015. This is the reserve matters application for the local centre, which will be positioned in the central area of the development, adjacent to the school and the community centre, as shown in yellow on this slide. To date, WBC has approved reserve matters for 597 dwellings, the NDR and the primary school and the community centre, which is located to the east of the site. The application comprises of 3 retail uses at ground floor level and 16 residential units over the first and second floors. The building will be positioned on the north side of the NDR at its junction with Road 24 and will partly front onto the roads in a central location to form a key focal point for the development. Within the original submission, the development was proposed to be 4 stories in height. However, a number of objections were received regarding this aspect. So during the application, revised plans were submitted, which included which reduced the number of stories down to 3 by removing the 4th floor, as shown in this slide. So this was the original submission. And this, in turn, reduced the number of residential units from 19 down to 16. So this slide shows the proposed layout of the site, which will comprise of three retail units at ground level and 16 apartments over the first and second floors. This is 12 two-beds and 4 one-beds apartments. Parking would be provided to the rear of the building and access from Road 24. At ground level, the proposal would provide 518 square metre of retail floor space, split between 3 retail units, with the largest unit being 386 square metres. Although the level of retail provision proposed is less than the amount stipulated within the outline, it's considered that the level of provision is acceptable for this location, particularly when taking into account consideration the other local existing centres in the area, and also the viability of Wokingham Town Centre. On the first and second floors, the residential units will comprise of 16 units of affordable housing with a proposed tenure of affordable rent. Again, although this type of affordable housing tenure does not currently form part of the existing 106 agreement, the principle, however, has been agreed with the WBC housing group, and as such would need to be secured through a deed of variation. The sizes of all the units comply with national standards and would also be provided with a balcony or terrace area. The soft landscaping strategy proposed for the setting of the local centre includes the provision of low-level shrubs, hedges and trees in appropriate spaces. Benches and smaller planters are proposed to be positioned between the trees, which would help provide an attractive public realm in this area. The parking provision for the residential units would be solely provided on site to the rear of the building. The parking provision associated with the retail units is proposed to be shared with the community centre car park as agreed at outline. To support this proposal, a parking demand assessment has been submitted, which demonstrates that the likely demand for parking across the 3 uses can be met by the proposed level of parking. It's also worth noting that should the school expand to a 2-form entry, then the parking provision would still be acceptable. As mentioned earlier, the proposal has been amended since the initial submission, and now a 3-storey building is proposed. The proposed design would be of a modern appearance with a flat roof, and the unit comprises of predominantly brick elevation with small areas of render where the sections of the building are set back to allow for balconies. It is considered that the overall approach of the design and layout of the building would be complementary with the wider development, as well as the adjacent phases, which have permission. Just as an example of that, the above slide provides the examples of the other phases on site. As you can see, the proposal would represent a design that is similar in appearance to what is already approved. So to quickly run through the members' updates, there's 3 updates really. The first update is an additional neighbour response received after the report is written. That's there in full. The second update is clarification on the recommendation, and in particular the heads of term for the deed of variation. And the third and final update is the inclusion of a new site location plan within the plan condition, which essentially includes the adjacent car park now, just to make sure that that parking is now secured. So therefore, the scheme is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed in the report, the members' update, and also subject to the signing of the accompanying deed of variation. Thank you, Chair.
Alex, the elevation was black and white. We saw nice colour elevations of some of the adjacent schemes. Is there a colour elevation of this scheme, please? I have reason to believe there is. if you'd like to sort of look at that, we'll move straight on to make progress and invite Peter Warren or agent representing Bovis Homes to speak, who's just the only registered speaker on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak and support this application. On behalf of Bovis Homes, I'd like to say that we are pleased with the positive recommendation made by your officers and the full explanation provided in their report. We appreciate that considerable efforts bringing this application to committee tonight. Granting consent for this policy compliance scheme would allow Bovis to deliver a high quality focal building at the heart of the Matthews Green development adjacent to the NDR. The proposed local centre includes 16 affordable rented homes, each with access to external amenity space and a viable retail offer on the ground floor that will meet the needs of the local community. The overall layout and appearance of the building is complementary to the adjacent primary school building and the wider development area. The parking provision proposed for the residential units complies with the council's parking standards, and we've also demonstrated that shared parking for the retail units and the adjacent school and community use will exceed the parking demand even at peak school drop-off and collection times. Bovis has engaged positively with the local community on the local centre proposals. We presented the proposals to residents of the North Wokingham Community Forum, and Bovis hold quarterly update meetings with the community, Embrook Community Liaison Group. We really hope that members will support this proposal to deliver the next phase of the Matthews Green development. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. And we don't have a ward member. Just meanwhile, thank you, Alex. He's put up the elevations, colour elevations of the scheme. So firstly, I know we've got Pauline, and then we'll come to Rochelle.
Thank you, Chairman. My main queries are about parking. Firstly, maybe somebody could explain to me how the amount of parking that's being provided for the flats is sufficient to meet our standards when there's actually only 9 non-disabled bays for what looks like 16 flats, 6 of which are 2-bedroom, I think. So maybe one of the officers could explain how that fits and explain what the public transport provision is, because I couldn't find that anywhere in the report. The second question, it looks like the parking for retail and community is relying on it not happening at the same time. There's a certain amount of logic to that, but I was a bit surprised that the retail use would only be 4 to 5 peak, which makes you wonder how a shop would ever make money if that's the only time it has a significant amount of usage. That sort of paralleling of parking has allowed you to reduce the standards from 77 to 57. I'm not entirely convinced by that, so maybe somebody could explain that to me. And the third thing was the drop-off zone. I've got a lot of experience of a school in my area where it had a drop-off zone, and then the school decided to reserve it for teachers' parking, and then there was no drop-off zone and nowhere for the kids drop-off to happen and nowhere for the parents to park. Is it possible that could happen in this drop-off zone? And if so, is it possible to condition it so that the school can't do that, so that it remains available for drop-off and for parents' short-term parking, rather than being grabbed by teachers to park in there all day? And the final question was a small question, but about the comment from the parish council about the size of the units. It seems to say in number 33 that they meet the national standards, but not WDBC standards. Okay, so what have we got a standard anymore then? Okay, thank you.
Look at the issue regarding public transport serving the site. Just confirmation that what is proposed is compliant with our parking standards and how that's achieved, and how we could ensure that the drop-off zone is retained as a drop-off zone. Thank you, Judy.
Okay, so taking the residential flats above the shops, first of all, there's 11 parking spaces proposed for 16 flats. they're all going to be unallocated spaces. So, sorry? 2 disabled.
Yes, yeah, 11 and 2.
Well, I think the 2 disabled is to just provide flexibility in case there are disabled tenants who would have, priority for those ones. I think actually there's a slight mistake there. I think the 2 disabled spaces are for the retail, the 11 spaces for the retail. Looking at the floor plans for the flats, they're all normal-sized spaces.
So that's for retail customers?
Yeah. Yeah, so just to confirm, the retail parking, 11 spaces includes 2 disabled, then through a separate barrier, there's 11 spaces for the flats, for 16 flats, and that's policy compliant in terms of our parking standards. Going on to the public transport provision, we did secure over, I think, £500,000 from Bovis towards public transport services back at the outline stage for Matthews Green, and those bus services will be running basically directly alongside the neighbourhood centre, and there's a bus stop very, very close by. The next one was about the retail peak. Although the peak for the retail was stated as 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. That's just the highest figure. It's pretty well spread out, to be honest, from 10 a.m. sort of through to then. So it's not just that there's.
So you've used the highest.
We've used the highest, yeah.
Worst case.
Yeah, exactly. And then just to go on to the drop-off zone at the school. So at the school planning application stage, that was a school drop-off, like a quick short-term drop-off for pupils, but it was also the servicing bay. So when the refuse vehicle turns up, it comes into the car park, it parks there, it empties the bins, and it's also used for school coach parking. So there would be pretty much no way that it could be converted to staff parking. And there's a parking management condition as well on the school application.
Sorry, just some clarity on the school. So the way the school lease is going to happen is the school will be the school, and then the parking will actually be held on to by the council. And the reason is that is purposely so you can have that shared parking.
In view of the fact, therefore, it remains within the council's control, I don't think there's a need to condition it, because ultimately, as the Highways Authority, they could prevent that being absorbed into other parking. Were you okay with the answers to the other points you had? Right. Next, we've got Rochelle, please.
Of course, parking. We still have, it may meet the council standards, but the council standards are utterly inadequate for the level of parking and the level of automobile ownership we have. And once again, I say that we need to redo the borough design guide for this. But will the residents of the flats be able to park in the retail car parking spaces as well? Because if they do, which I would if I lived there, and I couldn't find a space in the back lot, I would park in the retail spaces. So how is that going to affect the retailers' the ability to actually do that? And if they have bus service through there, that's very nice, but that means they're going to leave their cars home. And if you know, most flats usually have 2 residents, and they will have 2 cars because the people go to work or not go to work. And if they go to work, they may leave their cars there and take public transit. So again, we do not have adequate parking there. It's going to be a scrum for spaces.
Rochelle, you may, as always, on this issue, I don't disagree with you. Our parking standards, you need to keep on about this. Our parking standards do need revising. It's not, we can't refuse things because they don't comply with non-existent parking standards. They do comply with our parking standards. But I agree that parking standards should be improved to reflect car ownership in the borough and other reasons you've mentioned. Just on the retail unit, I'm sure you will get clarification on this, but obviously it tends to be peak parking for residential, tends to be in the evenings and overnight when the retail units wouldn't normally be in use. So perhaps, Judy, you could clarify the position. What is there that would prevent residents of the 16 affordable homes parking at any time or all day in the retail spaces?
There's a parking management condition for the local centre parking, so ultimately they would have control and have to submit details of measures that they're going to bring in to ensure that it's used for the proper purposes it should be used for, and any particular measures that they deem necessary. Just going back on the residential parking, I mean, the parking standards are based on census data for Wokingham, and census data for Wokingham does show that 41% of flats of this size don't tend to have a car associated with them. So yeah, just to reiterate really that it meets parking standards, and that's based on local census data.
If you'd like to go to some of the affordable homes in Wokingham, in various parts of Wokingham, you'll see more cars than that, because a lot of people happen to have a business vehicle as well for white vans or something like this, as opposed to also having a car for private transportation.
Yeah, as you know, Rochelle, the parking standards are the parking standards, and that's what we have to work within at the moment. But on the other issue, the retail, so there will be an anchor store in there, and they will manage it. So a retailer will not let people park in their stores. So those parking spaces will be reserved for the parking by the store.
Talk to Aldi right now.
Thank you, Chairman. Delighted to see in one of the charts a very detailed garden planting detail, and very, very nice it will look. But there doesn't seem to be anything that shows what the ownership of that will eventually be, or any maintenance. Should we consider this, and should there be some condition on maintenance of this quite detailed landscaping?
Yeah, so the landscaping will be controlled by condition, and then it's up to the landowner, who are Bovis, whether they want to put it up for adoption to the council or not. So as planning authority, we can't insist that they hand it over. Our preference is always that they hand it over and we can manage it. But if they want to maintain it, then they would have a management company for whoever the social landlord is, and also the shops who would do that.
Can you point me at that condition? Don't see a condition on maintenance of the...
There isn't. So the reason is because we don't know if they're going to hand it over to us. So there's a condition on the landscaping, but in terms of the management, what will happen is that if they want to maintain it, they can. If they want to hold on to it to maintain it, they can. If they want to hand it over to the council, we will maintain it. But the landscaping details will normally set out a management plan as well.
Since we have them present, as a Bovis representative, are you able to indicate whether it would normally be your intention to pass this over to the council, or whether you would retain it, or do you not know?
We don't know at the moment. There was an outline management plan for the whole site.
Okay.
So it would come under that. We do have management company on the site, but we don't know which way it would go.
Okay.
Sorry, Angus, to clarify, the outline, we don't need to duplicate the outline conditions, and they're on there. Sorry, I probably should have said that.
You can add my name to those who are concerned about the parking capacity, but I won't go into any specific detail. My question is more to do with the class of the shops and things. In 2 or 3 places, it refers to Class A, which is shops, financial, professional services, restaurants, cafes, hot food takeaways and drinking establishments. So that's Class A generally. What is Class A1 then? It's presumably more limited, is it? Because it refers in 2 or 3 places as to A class, which can be all these things, but then there's a recommendation we should have some sort of condition that says it should be just A1. Why the difference?
So Class A covers all of them, so it's the way they use Class order. Class A1 is to do with a shop, so a retail shop, so a Tesco, a Co-op, a Sainsbury shop, or a convenience shop. That's why the condition is on the larger unit, because we want to ensure that there is an anchor store and the shops are successful, and then they're not just changed into the Embrook shops, which obviously aren't that successful.
With that stuff. But then on page 77, you see it just says the principal retail unit will remain as Class 1 permanently retained. That sounds like it's more restricted, but you're saying A1 and A are identical, are they?
Yeah, so there's three units. and the use class covers all of the units. But what we want to do is we want to ensure the larger unit is retained for a convenience store.
Okay. Is that a guarantee then, that it will stay as a shop? Would no one be able to come along and ask to change it for planning?
That's what the condition is.
Yeah. Someone can challenge it. Yeah.
Anyone could.
Yeah.
We would have to recognise the value that a convenience store provided to an area of significant residential development. So I think, you know, we would normally probably resist such a change. Yes, yes. I understood that a well-known convenience store is interested in it. I presume we're not in a position to confirm who that is yet. I won't say so then. Right. Okay, fine. Right. Okay. Next, we've got Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I would really echo the comments Rachel, Malcolm and Pauline, and you yourself made it on parking standards. I think it's pretty recognised that we don't think a lot of them. One general point, I think I've got this right, just getting on. When I look at the representations on page 1881, there's all sorts of references, 15 spaces for 19 flats, then a fourth story, then 16 spaces for 19 flats, and it ends up with 11 spaces for 16 flats. My guess is the 11 spaces for 16 flats is the right figure. Most of these comments relate to the initial plan proposal, which was then modified by removal of the fourth. Yeah, I'm just getting that clear. And that's 6 of the 2-bedroom flats, I'm guessing now, are 2-bedroom flats, 10 are 1-bedroom flats. So that's how I arrived at that conclusion. I notice on page 76, item 7, it really comes back to the provision of electric vehicle charging. And I'll very quickly say I was remiss on items 29 and 31 to have not suggested there should be electric charging points in those 2 car parks. So just for the record, I'll say it now. But in this case, it does mention electric charging points. But then it goes on into the, and Pauline mentions 2 disabled parking spaces. Now, where and how many of these electric charging spaces will fit in, and how will they fit in with 11 car parking spaces for 16 units? Will they be part of them, in addition to them? Will they be in the retail area? Will they be in the residential area? We just really need to clarify that.
That's something we need to see. So that's why the condition's on there. So what we'll do is we'll see how they go on into the site and how they can be accommodated. We're early days yet. It's emerging policy and government policy as well. So all we can do is get the details in where they see fit. So the developers will see fit where to put them, and we will either agree with them or not, where the locations are. So we don't necessarily say that they're going to go here at these certain locations, because it depends how the site is laid out, really.
Again, since we have the advantage of the Bovis representatives here, do Bovis have a ratio they apply of electric charging points for every nth place, or is this, as it somewhat is for us as well, an emerging area?
It's really the dilemma. I mean, it's very clear there's a concern with 11 parking spaces for 15 flats. If you then start to look at some of them being electric or some of them being disabled or whatever, then that ratio starts to change. In theory, it could come down to 7, which would not be disabled or electric for 16 flats. And I really think that wouldn't work. So I would ask that that point is looked at, and that the ratio of parking according to the parking standards should not include disabled and electric points, because that limits the access and usability of those points.
I take your point. I would also have a proposal about parking standards, including electric charging points, that I want to raise with the committee when we've concluded this item anyway.
3 questions. ownership of the shops, as you mentioned about the existing Embrook shops, which are rather dilapidated, and the other little retail establishments in the other areas of Embrook are the same way. When the councils decided to sell them off to private people, the end result is usually a mess. I'm just wondering what's going to happen with that. Cycle parking. You're talking about putting cycle parking for the shops. That's very nice. Have you thought of doing that for Wokingham regeneration? Because there is absolutely no place to actually lock a bicycle up in Wokingham. And that was supposed to be in during the run. Okay. And lastly, that's a generalized thought. Infrastructure for electric charging places. What a lot of places are doing now is putting the infrastructure in and having the cables under the ground and things like this, so they can put them in when it's necessary, when there's a demand for them. But if you just put in 2 spaces, like Gary said, that's only required to be, they can only use them for electric. That's a waste of space, and a lot of times, if you've looked at the Carnival Pool car park, the electric spaces are normally empty, about at least 60% of the time that I've seen. So it's trying to find places, because you have to figure out where they're going to be. Are they going to be in the shops? Are they going to be in the flats? Where are they going to be? And considering we're probably going to be eliminating petrol cars by 2030 or 2040, it's something we need to think about now.
Unfortunately, the very easy answer to that is, because there's no policy covering it at the moment, and to address Gary's concern, is one that I wouldn't want to propose. But the simple solution is not to have any electric spaces, because then all the parking is available and we don't run into these problems. But that is not the right thing to do. Perhaps you just bear with me for this particular issue until we've resolved this and you hear what I have to say after this particular item.
The same thing, though, about parking spaces. We need to be looking at this and working on this now rather than waiting till sometime in the future. We keep saying every year, oh, we're going to do that eventually when we do X, Y, or Z. Well, X, Y, and Z are dead now, and we need to start doing some of these things now.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about affordable housing. We're told that the residential accommodation on the 1st and 2nd floors will be wholly affordable housing, affordable rent, although I understand that a deed of variation will be required to secure that. My question is, will this be in perpetuity? And if so, how is it managed? And are there any circumstances on which that could change, be rescinded in the future?
So the answer is yes, it is over the 2 floors. It will go to a social landlord, and I think you'll find that the Section 106 variation will include, it has to be retained for that. So yes, is the answer. It will be retained for social rent. Affordable rent, not social rent.
All right, and last point, I think, from Pauline.
Another question, actually, for officers. You said at one point, and maybe Rochelle made the point, that if people overflow the parking in the flats, which they're likely to, that they would then overflow into the parking for the shops. And you said that the shop owners would have, or the people who own that area, would have some sort of plan which had measures as to how they would deal with that. I'm just interested to know what sort of measures they've got that they could use. And then the second point I wanted to make quickly about electric charging is just, in London recently I've seen quite a lot of lamppost charging, and I don't know if that's an option. But the questions about the parking.
Yeah, with regards to how it's managed, normally when the building is handed over, so the retail, there'll be an operator who manages the retail units. They won't be sold to the retailers. So what they will have is they will actually own the land where the parking is, and there'll be rights of access across it. So they would have the right to remove somebody. It's the same with Aldi and all those ones.
Just like Waitrose.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the way it is. In terms of the, you're correct, there's so many different options to electric charging. And I think that's the point, is we're trying to guess what's going to happen in the future. So we're trying to basically future-proof it as best we can. Whether it be the cables, whether it be conductive charging, we don't know what the future holds. We just know that if everybody's electric cars at the moment, there'd be no power to turn on kettles. So.
This is a very brief point. If you go to page 101, it actually shows the car parking, the private car parking. and are the residential car parking. And there's 11 bays, which is correct, 16 flats, which is correct, 2 disabled bays, which makes it 9, and if you had charging points there too, it would make it 7. So in a way, my concern is, as I did make the point, is how is all this accommodated? If you took that down from 11 to 7, that would certainly be well below the parking standards. So really, does the parking standards take into consideration such things as the limited use of disabled parking and electric charging points? Because if it does, it has a bearing on how we look at car parking in general.
The simple answer to that is our parking standards are overdue for a review because obviously when they were set, I don't think anybody was driving any electric cars. So we need to address that. Judy, did you want to add a point to that?
Yeah, there's just there is a mention in our parking standards that developers should consider electric vehicle charging, but obviously the parking standards were set in 2011, which was a bit before the time when people started getting electric vehicles in such numbers. We do have an updated highway design guide at the moment, which sets out some guidance for developers in terms of numbers of electric charging points and what proportion of them should be passive and what proportion of them should be active. That's what we're working with at the moment. It's the best we have, but it's obviously a very fast-moving area and it's likely to be updated in future.
Sorry, the first and second pages of the members' update. So can you please indicate whether you're prepared to support planning application 191024, complete with the additional points mentioned on page 1 and 2 of the members' update? All those members wishing to support, please indicate. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members.